and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hey, this is Aaron from Pursuit of Thrills, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, this is Jake Kilcup with Rocky Mountain Construction, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hey, I'm Robert Coker of Super 78 and the Season Pass podcast, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
This is Tim Holleran from the Coaster Crew, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Coaster Challenge podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and let us flow through. Coaster Challenge podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your host, Andrew Locke.
Hi, Coaster Challenge listeners. This is Andrew, one of the producers of the Coaster Challenge podcast. And today I'm very excited. We have a very special guest here on the podcast. I am proud to welcome Adam Sandy from Zamperla. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thanks so much.
We're glad to have you. We're going to have a lot of fun talking today. So, Adam, the first time I had heard about you was I was at IAAPA last year, 2021, and certainly wanted to see what Zamperla had to say there and whatnot. And I saw you get up there, and I didn't know who you were. And I just loved how passionate you were. You know, you were introduced as the coaster guy at Zamperla, and I've since have learned about you. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you because you're not just someone that happens to work in the industry, which is awesome, but you clearly are a fan as well. Perhaps even you might even call yourself an enthusiast. So we're looking forward to talking to you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was very lucky to kind of just turn my childhood passion into a job, and I don't think many people get to say that. So that's been just a really fun journey for me.
That's awesome. That is fantastic.
It's been a lot of fun. And, there's certainly some challenging days, when the thing you enjoy is your work. But overall,
Right.
it's been a lot of fun. And I think something that my kids are a little bit jealous of, or maybe they expect it's the norm. I don't know. But they just think their dad goes to amusement parks and rides roller coasters. I am getting them out of that train of thought. But it is fun, I think, to have them be part of my life, too. And I get to bring them to parks. So even kind of converting to a dad, it's been a really fun profession to have, certainly.
Oh, that's cool. And how old are your kids?
6 and 10.
Sort of getting to the age where they can start to understand that, no, dad just doesn't go to the parks to have fun. He's actually providing for the family and doing hard work. Okay, well, we've kind of already started to talk about the first question that I always tend to ask our guests. Certainly, you can get into a little more detail here. So just go ahead and tell us about yourself and your experience working within the theme park industry.
Sure. So like I said, I kind of just grew up interested in roller coasters. And for me, it was, call it hobby, passion, whatever. And I kind of can't tell you why, but as a kid, a lot of boys are drawn to sports. So they've got sports people up on their walls. And for me, it was roller coasters. So I had Harry Traver and John Allen pictures, not lying, up on my walls. So I love coasters, and I can't tell you why now, and I couldn't tell you why then, but it was just something that stirred inside me and just kind of drew my interest, both from the history perspective, the technology perspective, and I think just the fear perspective, kind of all those things together really pulled me in. And so I was, just doing this as sort of a hobby until college. And at that time, I just said, I'd like to get in the amusement park industry. So in 2001, I joined what was then Amusement Business, which was a news weekly that served the industry. And then in 2004, I joined Ride Entertainment. And there I kind of wore a lot of hats. So I sold a lot of coasters, sold attractions, also sold our installation services, and also worked on some financial partnerships we did. So I did kind of a little bit of everything there. And then COVID hit and affected our industry, obviously, very dramatically.
Yeah.
And so I stepped back from Ride in 2020. And then about a month after I left, Zamperla called and said, hey, we're working on kind of revamping our coaster division. Would you like to be sort of the sales face of that? We have a huge team, but we need someone out front. And would you like that position? And I jumped at it. So I've been with them actually right about a year now.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm glad, as you mentioned, COVID certainly has affected the industry in a number of ways, and not necessarily all bad, but certainly it's been a challenge. And, I don't work in the industry, but I certainly volunteer in it. This is one of actually 2 podcasts I produce that's in the industry. And, certainly as an enthusiast, I'm following the industry as well. And it's been an interesting ride for sure. So I'm glad to hear that, while you had to step away from ride because of what happened with COVID, you were able to just bounce right back like that. That's awesome. And wind up at Zamperla, helping them with the coasters, which we'll talk more about later. So that's awesome. By the way, whereabouts do you live? I know you said you just moved.
I'm about to move. Yeah. So I'm actually in Baltimore. I moved here in 2004 for the job with Ride Entertainment. And just because I serve a global role, there was really no need for me to move to New Jersey for the Zamperla office there. So I work out of my house in Baltimore.
Got it. Yep, I can relate. I don't work in the industry, but I work 100% remote, and I can live wherever I want, which is awesome. And Zamperla is based in New Jersey, you said, right? What part of New Jersey?
Okay, so the U.S. office is in Boonton near Parsippany. So the U.S. office is there, and then our main headquarters is in Vicenza, which is about an hour west of Venice.
Right, of course. And it's Alberto is the founder, is that right?
So the founder was actually Antonio, and then okay. Alberto is his son, and then Alberto's son Antonio is CEO now. He took over about the same time I started with the company in January last year as CEO.
Got it. That's why I was thinking of Alberto, because I remember meeting him in 2019. He was at IAPA.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me that Zamperla's US-based office is in the tri-state area, because one of the things that I think is really cool about Zamperla and why you guys kind of have a little bit of nostalgia preference for you guys versus other ride manufacturers. Growing up in New Jersey, going to Coney Island, and you guys, what you've done with Luna Park and revitalizing it and it being a test bed for you. And I think that's so cool. And that's just kind of, again, it's more personal for me. It's because Coney Island's one of my original home parks. So
awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, awesome. Well, thanks for kind of going over kind of your brief overview, and obviously we'll touch into, definitely dive into more details later. But before we get more into your experience, especially at Zamperla, and maybe talk about some of the things that you guys have going on now, we're going to talk about you, because as you pointed out, and as I alluded to, you yourself, you're passionate about this industry and you're working with that passion. So let's talk about your enjoyment of coasters and of the industry before we get into your work. So we'd like to get into the theme park time machine. And as part of this, we wind up always learning something new about each guest. Part of the mission of our podcast, which is to basically focus on theme park therapy and facing fears and just positivity and all those types of things. So we'll get into that. So what was the first coaster that you ever rode in your life?
The first coaster I rode was Glissade at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I was probably about 2 or 3. It was probably 80 or 81. And my parents put me on. It was not really my choice. So that was my first coaster. I think it was a Schwarzkopf Jumbo Jet.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I've not heard of that one. The first time I ever went to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, was about 86 or 87. The one coaster I remember riding there was Big Bad Wolf. Before I was an enthusiast. I wasn't doing looping coasters back then, but I love Big Bad Wolf. It's still my favorite aero suspended. But
it was an awesome ride.
Oh yeah. I miss it. I miss it for sure. Okay. So talk to me about the one coaster in your life thus far that has scared you the most in terms of the anticipation and the anxiety leading up to riding it for the first time.
Sure. So I rode Glissade when I was little, and I kind of swore off coasters after that. So I was this interesting little kid that wanted to go to amusement parks but didn't want to ride any big coasters. So my parents weren't exactly thrilled about doing that, but they did humor me quite a bit. So I'm very appreciative. But so I rode that, and then I rode the River King Mine Train at Six Flags St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. But I didn't really ride anything bigger for a long time. And then when I was 12, for whatever reason, I just said, okay, I feel like I'm ready to take that step and ride a really big coaster. And so it was at my 12th birthday party. We went to Six Flags, and I ended up closing out the night with my first ride on the Screaming Eagle. So it was just a wonderful experience. I was definitely scared, but kind of that moment where you feel you're ready to do it, but you're still nervous. And it was just, beautiful summer evening, the chaser lights on the coaster just blinking on and off. And it was just a huge, memorable ride. And I was definitely very nervous and quiet as I got up to the station. But when I got back, after we went through the course, I loved the ride, and we pulled back in the station. I was like, now I just want to ride every roller coaster I can. Just kind of that transformation on that ride that really turned me from someone who is interested in coasters to like someone who also loved riding them.
Got it. Okay, so the Screaming Eagle, you said it was in St. Louis, so that was a classic PTC. So you were nervous about it, but you conquered those fears, and then when you got off of it, you were just all about, I want to conquer all the coasters now.
Pretty much, yeah. It was weird. It was just like a switch was flipped. But I'd been so interested in them and hesitant to ride, but just I had such a good time on it. It was sort of, for me, that nice balance of excitement, fun, and fear that I just wanted to go try more and see what they were like.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting. That first time that we really conquer our fears, like Santa Coaster, I hear this story again and again, and me myself, I had the same experience where that, like you said, great way to put it. You have that switch that flips. Because I had been on a few coasters in my life, and I've told the story of my first, real big coaster and what me being an enthusiast effectively. For me, my scary thing, I've never really been afraid of heights in my life. It's really the inversions. That was the thing that I had to conquer when I was younger.
Okay.
And I won't go into all the details, but one of my own parks, of course, in New Jersey was Great Adventure. And this is back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And I conquered my inversion fear. You would think I should have done it on something like lightning loops, which was still open back then, because that was only one loop, although you go through it forwards and backwards. But I was at the whim of my friends, peer pressure, and the Great American Scream Machine, which I think had 7 inversions?
7, yeah.
And I remember riding it that first time, and the fear became excitement, like in that first loop. I was like, oh my God, this is not bad at all. And oh, wow, this is awesome. This is fun and thrilling. And then the switch, when I got off the ride, that switch got flipped. And I told my friends, I said, take me to all of the coasters here. all of the ones that go upside down. I don't care. Take me to all of them.
Yeah, I want to ride everything.
Yeah. So it's interesting how fear can give way to passion, to excitement, and to doors being opened, and just all by conquering fear. So very powerful. Talk to me about perhaps any other positive ways that theme parks and coasters have had on you.
I mean, I'd say on the personal side, it's just been really nice because I've met a bunch of people of all ages. So that's been really cool. And I think also just watching kind of the technology of coasters and how it's made coasters different has been really interesting to me. And I've really enjoyed that. Just, things like limbs, LSMs, the advancements in lighter weight materials. Just, I'm not an engineer. I guess I know enough math and science to be dangerous, but to me, from the outside, I'm just amazed at what people can do with ride designs now. And I'm excited about pushing the envelope on that. I mean, we're even doing stuff, and other people are too, but just like with an aluminum milled chassis where, we're taking out the welds that were on traditional coasters, and now we're basically mill machining a block of aluminum into the chassis, and just doing things like that 2 decades ago no one would have thought about. And it's, to me, just some really cool technology being applied both on making coasters exciting but also making them reliable. It's kind of across the board. Roller coaster technology just kind of continues to improve by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, no, that's very, very apt and a really good point. And I personally am an engineer. Again, I don't work on coasters, but because I'm an engineer, because of my collegiate background, my work experience, I love how things work. I love, basically all kinds of moving vehicles. I'm your typical, guy engineer. I love sports cars. I love planes. I love trains and, coasters and rockets. And yeah, so I love all that stuff. And so part of my interest in rides in general and coasters specifically is related to just, I love moving vehicles and how they work and just watching them, the kinetics of them. And yeah, so I can relate on that. And yeah, the technology is incredible. I especially living here in Florida, the past, almost coming up on 4 years now, with some of the coasters that have been installed here in the past few years, and the technology involved with those, and just, certainly elsewhere as well. It's sort of an idiom and overused expression, because you can almost say this is true a lot of times throughout history, but it's a great time to be a coaster enthusiast. despite COVID, because there's
Mhm.
so much innovation and competition in the industry, which is good. So and those engineering capabilities and technological improvements, they're going to keep coming. We're not done. So
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we're working on stuff, and other people are too, that I think in 5 or 10 years, and be just coaster concepts that come out that people can't even think of. Just like RMC came out with their ride system in 2011 for Texas Giant. That was kind of out of left field. No one had thought of that. Then Fred and Alan created it. So I think we're going to get more of those moments as more people who are younger and have passion for the industry get in on the engineering and design side and just come up with some great ideas.
oh yes, absolutely. And again, even despite COVID, there is a huge demand for theme parks and coasters. People just love them. I mean, it goes well beyond enthusiasts. We are a minority of the population.
Sure.
We might be the loudest voices at times, sometimes not for good reasons. But certainly the GP, as we call it in the general public, there is just a huge demand. I see it here in Florida. I see it all over the place where I travel, and I love it because without the GP, without the enthusiasts, without all of us, paying for the annual passes, the tickets, the upcharges, etc. Parks can't afford to buy coasters. It's not like they buy them magically. Coasters don't grow on trees. So yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to downplay COVID, but I think now that the parks are open again, I think what we've seen and what we know is they're a really good environment for something like COVID, because you can be outdoors but still go with your family and be safe. It's a different than if you're in a movie theater or other confined space. For the most part, most of the attractions at parks you can go and enjoy. Even in 2020, the ones that were open did really well, just because people were comfortable being in an outdoor environment where the risk was lower. So it's just nice that I think that we can kind of provide some escapism for people. That's sort of been what our industry's been good at historically, whether it's Coney Island in the early 1900s or Disneyland. And even now, it's nice to get out of the house, whether you got kids or friends or whatever, you want to get out of the house right now. And the amusement parks are a great, safe place to do that.
Oh, absolutely. They are one of the healthiest forms of escapism, and that escapism, that immersion and getting away from your problems and giving yourself a break from anxiety and thinking about all the troubles you have in your life, COVID, otherwise. That's what makes theme parks so great. And that's part of that theme park therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I dare someone to ride Velocicoaster not get off just happier than they were 5 minutes ago. I just don't think it's possible.
So yeah, no, absolutely. The Velocicoaster is the Goldilocks coaster, in my opinion. It is my number one coaster, as a lot of our audience already knows. I've now been on it 107 times.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, at this point, when we're recording here, I 107 times, and it's the only coaster I am keeping track of re-rides, because prior to riding Velocicoaster, my number one was from kind of a number of years back, and I wasn't thinking about re-rides or counting that again. Apps didn't exist as like they do now. And now that I have this new number one, I'm like, well, I can keep track, and I put in my social media profile. It's just fun. And so yeah, it's been fun tracking the re-rides and getting all the rides on it, and getting a relaunch on it actually.
Cool.
Last winter, which was amazing. Getting that extra backwards launch and then the stronger boost launch was awesome. But anyway, it's all great stuff, and it's coasters are so great for being in the moment. They are one of the best ways to easily be mindful, to have a few minutes of mindfulness, because all that adrenaline and all the forces that are leading to that, and the endorphins, it all so counterbalances all that negativity. So
definitely.
Yeah. So obviously, you've been on a bunch of coasters. You've ridden a number of coasters over the years, I'm guessing, right? Been to a lot of parks, right? So talk to me about what the craziest moment you've ever had on a coaster was.
I'd say probably the craziest moment was I got to ride Gravity Max at Discovery World, Vekoma tilt coaster. I think Qiddiya is supposed to get one, but up until that park opens in Saudi, it's, I believe, the only tilt coaster Vekoma's done. And just that whole sensation of going out on that piece of track, the brakes locking, I got the back seat ride on it, and then having that whole mechanism tilt 45 degrees or 90 degrees, so you're facing straight down, is nuts. I mean, it's just one of those visuals that is hard to beat. And then also you're just held by air brakes, and then they just open. So you're almost, you can just feel the airtime as the train gets yanked out from under you. So it's not a long ride. It's got like a loop and a helix afterwards, but that moment is just a pretty amazing moment, and much more intense than I was expecting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that this is the first time I get to talk to someone who's been on this ride, and I'll explain because it's more than just, nerding out and, you've been on an amazing coaster. That's a rare credit. So quick backstory. So first of all, over the weekend, a few days ago, I was literally talking to a friend of mine that I've been hanging out with in person the day before. He didn't realize until we were hanging out in person that I've been on a lot of international credit. And so, he was asking me about this and that. And one of the things that came up was one of my white whales here and abroad, and it is Gravity Max. And why? Because I've been to Taiwan twice. Yeah, last time I was there was in 2007. Went to that park, was there all day, waiting for Gravity Max to open. It never did. I have been on tilt coasters before, and I'm not just counting Gringotts. I've been on Gringotts. In 2019, I was in China for 2 weeks, and I got to go on Battle of Jungle King.
Mm-hmm.
And Battle of Jungle King is amazing because just the visuals of it and the dueling, which had never dueled, they never opened up the other side of that. But at least I finally got to go on a significant tilt coaster. I mean, Gringotts, you can almost think of it as almost being like a family kids, but a family tilt coaster. But it is a tilt coaster. But being outside there, much taller, steeper angle. It's not Gravity Max at 90 degrees, which is really why I would love to ride Gravity Max. But Battle of Jungle King, I don't know what the angle is, maybe 7 degrees or something. It's relatively steep. And yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying because it's such a unique experience. And the whole thing about, is the train going to be held there or not? This is Golden Horse. I don't trust Golden Horse, et cetera. It that was the thrilling aspect of that ride more so than the course itself. So I can totally relate. This is the first time we've had a large scale tilt coaster being the craziest moment, but I totally makes sense. Having ridden one myself like that, it's intense. It is, especially in the, this is back when we're still doing YouTube here at Coaster Challenge. I did my recordings and POVs, and I was recording a POV on that ride with audio. And there was this woman behind me crying, just bawling. David, who's in the background, I'm sure remembers because he edited the video. How, oh my God, she must have been so scared. And I get it. But anyway, so that's a great, crazy moment. So thank you. So tell me, what is your favorite coaster of all time?
For me, that's a really hard one. Sort of off the cuff, too, that really speak to me on the wood side. I've just always loved Raven at Holiday World. I just think it's kind of a complete wood coaster design in a really short amount of track. I love the layout of it, and riding at night is amazing. And then I also just like Space Mountain. I liked a lot. I like indoor coasters, so like Space Mountain in California. I also like the Eurosat, the old version at Europa Park with kind of the techno music on it. Like I love that kind of light show in the dark, sound, immersion, all those things tossed together just to create a really different experience. You can kind of pair that coaster with, it could be really high-tech projections like on Gringotts, or it could be lower tech sound and light. But I really like that whole experience.
Have you been to China?
I have.
Have you been to Shanghai?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've been on Tron. I'm surprised, given what you just described there, that Tron wasn't mentioned, because I was thinking maybe you hadn't been on Tron. I was going to make a prediction, but so do you not see Tron in that same light?
Like, Tron didn't really blow me away. I don't know why. Like, I love the station. I love the whole music and the atmosphere, and I love the little pre-launch segment.
Right.
But sort of once you go indoors, it just felt very kind of cardboard cutout to me, and it didn't have that kind of pow I was expecting for a new coaster. And maybe I'm cutting Space Mountain a little slack since it's like 40 years old now. I don't know.
Right.
But I thought Tron, it's a very fun ride, and it does exactly what it was intended to. But I thought it would just have a little more punch in terms of like the thematics surrounding the ride experience.
I see. Okay, I get that. I think for me, why it's different, Tron is not my number one, but Tron is in my top 10. It's my top Disney coaster.
Okay.
There's a couple reasons. One, I'm a huge fan of the Tron movies, especially Tron Legacy, and Daft Punk's soundtrack, which they use on the ride, is so good. So good. It's well adapted. Even from just like the sort of lead up music when you're just kind of rolling out of the station. And I can hear the music now, what they play in that part, which is from the movie. And it's just brilliant how they kind of, the anticipation they do, the build up that they do with the music and with the launch and throughout the ride. But I rode sport bikes for years.
Okay.
And so, Granted, there are other motorcycle coasters. I've been on Booster Bike. It's Overland, which is the kind of earlier model of that technology, if you will, for Vekoma. I've been on Hagrid's and other motorcycle type coasters, but Tron is a little bit more of a sport bike like feel because it's more aggressive stance like a sport bike and how the riding position is. And I just love it. But again, that's it's a different kind of perspective. So the other ones you mentioned though made sense. Europa Park, I've not been to. I'm planning to go there this year. I've heard good things about Eurosat. Now you didn't mention Voyage. What do you think about Voyage?
For me, I'll ride it, be amazed by it, but want to sit down for like 10 minutes because it's definitely for me an aggressive coaster and a long aggressive coaster. And Raven's just a ride I can jump right back on 2 seconds later in the back seat and love it. So I definitely have much respect to Voyage. It's just not my favorite.
And again, this is all about opinion. All the jokes aside, and a bunch of my friends and I, we all have these jokes with each other about the goat coaster and I'll say, oh, I'm going on my goat coaster tomorrow, and another friend will say to me, which is about Velocicoaster, a friend of me will say, oh, I didn't realize you're coming to Ohio tomorrow because their number one is Steel Vengeance, and stuff like that. But anyways, it's all about respecting each other's preferences, which is a big thing. But Voyage is my number one wooden coaster. I've only been to Hollywood World once. I went to Hollywood Nights last year, and that was the super busy one with all the issues and the unfortunate of that ride or the first night. And so I got to ride it I think 4 times on Saturday, the day it was open. And I was not getting worn out from it or tired. I ride wooden coasters really well, aggressive ones. But I want I want to take that challenge that you just alluded to, and I'm hoping to go back this year for Hollywood Nights. I've applied for it. We'll see if I make it in. Where with a smaller number of guests like it used to be, where I can maybe get on it, 10, 15 times in a day, and let's see how I do. But so far, at least the times I've been on, I was like, I want to keep going. I kept getting back in line, and so. But I get what you're saying. Raven is more rideable, especially for a lot of people. So tell me, what is your least favorite coaster?
Probably my least favorite of the old Chance Toboggan. Those were just not fun rides. Yeah. I have heard this is back in the day, like in the 70s. If they faulted, sometimes they'd have to get a crane to evac because you're in that little tube and they have to pull the car out. So they were kind of this combination of claustrophobia and being very uncomfortable and not that exciting. So it kind of hit a nice trifecta there, and not my favorite. I think I rode the one at Conneaut about 2 decades ago, and I think I've been on that one and one other one, and don't know if I need to do another after that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever ridden a Chance Toboggan. I don't recall riding one, and I can definitely understand, like you said, that trifecta. It's like the really bad combination of things that all go in that same direction. So I get I get it. All right, well that makes a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and switch gears now. Zamperla, the company that you now work for, has really made a name for itself, in the industry, especially with its flat rides, particularly the Discovery series of rides, which are among my favorite flat rides. I love those spinning disc pendulum rides, and you guys make some, an awesome version of them. Some of the biggest ones, etc. Those are typically, I don't oftentimes ride a lot of flat rides at a typical, a bigger Six Flags Cedar Fair type park. But those pendulum rides, the Discoveries, those are ones I'll always ride because they're just so fun. So tell me, with these flat rides, how was Zamperla able to make such a name for itself with them? Like how, what's the magic?
Sure. So, I'd really have to sort of go back to when we started, because it's all been kind of an evolution. We really started as, I call it kiddie family ride company. And we were different than a lot of the older ones like Herschel and Mango's, because we were really the first big company to have parents and kids ride together, because historically kiddie rides were for kids. And we started coming up with attractions like the Crazy Bus, where parents could ride it comfortably, not have their knees in their chin, and kids could have a lot of fun. It was a little more dynamic than just going around in a circle. And so we worked a long time to kind of build our marketplace there and be the kind of the go-to company for kiddie family rides. And so sort of the next step was us looking at the market and saying, where do we need to go? And that's when we started coming up with, rides like the Hawk and Power Surge in like the early 2000s, which were kind of our first bigger thrill flat rides. And then we did a good job with them, but we really saw kind of a strategic position in the marketplace where there wasn't a lot of competition for the big flat rides. Like Husk kind of had their giant rides concept they did in the early 2000s.
Right.
You do have Intamin still making some of the big gyro swings, but no one really stepped into that place where and said, a big part of our portfolio is going to be these big thrill rides. And that's a decision that we made as a company. And then that allowed us to really become a company that a lot of people, if they were starting a park like OA or in China or in the Middle East, they started to come to us saying, we want to buy everything from you guys, or we want to buy all the flat rides from you guys. And that really allowed us to kind of get a really strong market position there. And it's just something we haven't yielded. And that's really was the genesis of us wanting to invest more in coasters. Was Antonio and Alberto and other people at the company said, we're the company that pretty much people sole source the kiddie and family rides to us. We're one of a handful of contenders for the big thrill rides. We want our coasters to be as good and as well recognized as those other two segments. So we're going to make the coasters great also. So that's kind of how the evolution of the company's happened, I'd say, in the last 20, 25 years in terms of product.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And in a way, if you think about it, you guys kind of followed a similar path that Intamin took, because Intamin's been around for decades, and going back into the 80s, maybe even before that, they were making not flat rides per se, but they make pretty much all the rapids rides out there. They created the free fall rides, the first gen free fall rides, and then they moved on to the tower based free fall rides in the 90s and various other rides. And then starting in the mid to late 90s, they started getting into coasters. And so they've not been into coasters very long at all. So they were historically the company that parks would go to for a lot of other rides. And here you guys are kind of a similar vein here, with a lot of the flat rides and, like you said, the kiddie rides, and got more into the thrilling flat rides. And I know you guys were doing some stuff like with water and water rides, and now getting into coasters, kind of offering kind of a full suite, just like, not a lot of companies do that. We're a coaster podcast, RMC and Vekoma and B&M and, all these major coaster manufacturers, they just make coasters. Intamin is one of the few that does everything. And here you guys are. And I think there's a lot of room in that space for that sort of one-stop shopping, or, hey, new park, they want to come to someone, just partner with them. Like, I think you mentioned OA. I think OA, how many Zamperla rides does OA have? I know they partner with you guys.
Probably about plus or minus 20 rides in the initial package when it opened.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah. So, you guys, I think there's a lot of room for what you're doing and how you're expanding. So I mentioned earlier that I went to IAAPA, not just this past year, but in 2019, the previous IAAPA. And I was there representing Coaster Challenge in both years, actually representing ACE as well in 2021. And in 2019, representing Coaster Challenge, I had, various Thuzy friends of mine that were representing their own channels, and that's why they were there. And we were enjoying and doing interviews and covering things and whatnot, but we were certainly enjoying the rides as well. And I remember all of us, my group, if you will, we kept coming back to Zamperla's booth in 2019 because you guys had Nebulas there. Your debut of Nebulas. Yeah. And that was just such a fun ride. It's so fun to watch. I can only imagine what it would be like to watch that with a lighting package in the dark, at night in a park, in a real park out in the real world. Certainly, we at least got to ride it, with the lights on, if you will, like simulating during the day. But it's just such a fun little flat ride. It's more fun than you would think it is, I think, even by looking at it. But like I said, the kinetics, it's great to watch. So, where have these been installed thus far that you can talk about? Or I'd love to be able to ride one of these in public.
It's been a lot. I want to say we sold well over a dozen actually during the pandemic, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Yeah, but it's like you said, it's one of those rides that's just really captured people's imaginations. And I think that's a combination of exactly what you said. It's a really fun ride that is certainly a little more exciting than you think it's going to be. It's not overly thrilling, but it's that perfect tweener ride. We've been really trying to hit that kind of market segment where like 42 inches is kind of the big accompanied height limit, 48 is where you ride alone. And we've been trying to think up those new attractions that we can get, like the Super Flume we're doing up at Coney, and this ride too, are all in that kind of tweener zone. And they're great rides because they're a lot of fun. Younger kids can get on them. But like that one, to me, is just mesmerizing to watch. Like it looks really cool. And it's one of the few flat rides I've seen where people just stand and watch it for 15, 20 minutes. It's like a roller coaster where, at Cedar Point, you get people watching Top Thrill because they want to see people's reaction. On this, it's more almost mesmerizing because the arms is going back and forth as the whole thing turns. It's just really fun to watch. And so we've got stateside, we've got him over at Luna, and then Kalahari in Texas, and then where's the other one? Oh, Adventure Dome in Las Vegas. So they have them right now. And we do anticipate in the next season or two, there'll be several more popping up in the US as well as worldwide.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's very nice. Yeah, I am hoping to get to Luna and Coney Island in general this year. Last time I was there was 2017.
Okay.
And, I do go to New York City, periodically, every couple of years, sometimes even more often, not necessarily in the summer season when you guys are open there. But I love going to Coney Island. I mean, I'm a huge Nathan's fan. I love going to the original Nathan's and all the little fair food there and just walking the boardwalk and, jumping on the rides, getting on the Cyclone, the Wonder Wheel, and hitting the other newer rides like what you guys have at Luna. And yeah, so I'll definitely have to check that out. Because I would love to get on Nebulas again. And yeah, you like you said, it's a mesmerizing, almost like it's a hypnotic ride to watch.
Yeah.
And listeners, if you've not heard of Nebulas, check it out on Zamperla's website. And just like all the Zamperla names, the sound at the end, it's the Z. Zamperla Z.
Gotta have the
Nebula,
Z. Gotta have the Z.
Yeah, always got the Z. So it's Nebula with a Z at the end, and you'll see it on their website. It's a really cool ride. We talked about, kind of where Zamperla came from and how they evolved, and the kiddie rides, the flat rides, the thrill rides. And now, granted, you guys were already offering coasters, but you're really looking to beef them up. So talk to our audience about what's going on, what new things you're getting into, how the trends you're moving into and whatnot.
Sure. So I think kind of the biggest change was that, after the Thunderbolt opened at Coney Island, it's a really fun ride, but it wasn't as good of an attraction as we thought it would be. And that's when our ownership kind of came together and said, okay, we really want to be in this coaster space. Let's do a 5-10 year plan on becoming a player. Because it's not like, there aren't a whole lot of people out there who can kind of bend coaster track. It's not a very common thing. So they said, okay, we're going to make this plan because we want to be in this space. And they invested a lot in really good people. And we actually have one of the largest in-house engineering teams in the industry for roller coaster design right now, over 25 engineers. And so we also invested in our technologies, just so making better, smoother coasters. And so you really started seeing that in our 2018 coasters, like the factory coaster that opened in China. And then we had also that year, the Super Twister open at Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi in Dubai, or in the UAE. And so those are some of the first of that next generation. And then we just kind of continue that. In 2019, we opened a Thunderbolt Relampaggio, and that's in Guatemala. And then last year, we opened a junior coaster at Ferrari World in the UAE. And that one, all of these have really been, I'd say, next generation Zamperla coasters. They're really smooth, a lot of fun, really good layout. So all those things we've been working toward, we started to achieve. And so my role has been to kind of come on and just be the megaphone really for that whole engineering team we have and talk about what we've done in the past that people didn't know about, just because some of the projects like, Ferrari World in March of 2020, obviously did not get a lot of press with that coaster because of the timing, understandably. So talking about those things, but also working with our team to come up with new ideas. So this year we've announced the first one is actually down the road from you opening this year, and that's our family coaster lift and launch, and that's Peppa Pig at the new expansion at Legoland, Florida, which we're super excited about. So that kind of takes our classic family coaster, made for kids' first coaster ride, but it's really been upgraded. So it's got a lot of things that guests will like. It's got individual lap bars. It's got magnetic brakes. So it's very smooth, has tires on the lift. So it's much smoother than our old chain versions, better track work. And then also this layout has a launch halfway through the course. So it's going to be a lot more exciting than our traditional family coaster. So that's kind of, for the smaller ones at that 36-inch height requirement, it's a great first coaster. And with everything we're doing now, we're trying to offer kind of a marketing hook on it, because we realize that roller coasters are a big investment. And if we come up with just another off-the-shelf chain lift coaster, that doesn't really differentiate us from the competition. So everything we're coming up with, that one has got something unique. At IAAPA, we kind of showcase the family throw launch concept. So this is geared more toward riders 42 inches and up. But again, we said, okay, we want to take the attributes of the classic mine train, really wide rider demographic, a lot of fun, but how do we make that marketable? And so with that, we had kind of two key elements. One is that our layout's going to start with a backward launch that goes into a dead end spike, and then a second forward launch. And we're also offering different vehicles on it. So we're going to have the motorcycle sidecar, and the Jeep. So we have different riding styles available for parks. So again, letting them create the story that they want to tell with the attraction. And then the biggest and baddest kind of we've come up with is the double heart. So we're offering that in 50 meters, which is about 164 feet, and 70 meters, which is 230 feet. And that's our triple launch concept that, I know that other people have them on the market, but we think that it's going to be really exciting. It's taller than anyone else with this concept. We think it's going to have a lot more airtime. And then also the trains are super comfortable. So there are lightning trains. They have a lap bar that actually comes over the shoulder, but just secures you at the lap. It's really comfortable. The seats are much wider. I'd say they're similar to much more like B&M Hyper than they are anything else in terms of the seat size and the seat spacing. So really trying to make it much more comfortable for riders. And we've also lowered our center of gravity. So if you look at our older Thunderbolt trains, we've actually lowered the CG from where it was to bring it closer to the track center. And we think all those things are going to make a great layout, which we have in the double heart, have a vehicle to match. So a really great vehicle that's really comfortable to ride in and tracks really well.
Nice. That's awesome. So a few things I want to touch upon there that you mentioned. So the first one, I'm kind of trying to go in order, is you mentioned Ferrari World. So have you been there, by the way?
I have. Unfortunately, it was closed when I visited this year because of COVID. They had a really rolled back schedule, understandably. But I did get to go and check out the park and check out our junior coaster this year.
I went to Ferrari World in January 2011, basically opening month.
Okay.
And so there's a couple of coasters that have been since put in that since I've been there, I need to go back there. That's of course part of why parks put new rides in, so that people have been there before, they come back. And I look forward to going back. And I'm a car guy. That's one of my other hobbies. I love sports cars. Never owned a Ferrari. Ferrari's not necessarily my speed, literally or figuratively, but I'm more of a Porsche guy, actually more of a Tesla guy currently. But I certainly respect Ferrari, and they're gorgeous, amazing automobiles, amazing works of engineering. And I was so excited to go to Ferrari World, and I had a blast there that day. And that park is just so unique, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's not many indoor parks of that scale. Of course, it's technically not all indoors, but all the rides start indoors at least. And you have that, of course, because the Middle East and the heat in the summer, the air conditioning and all that. But just what an experience. And I think that really says something for you guys at Zamperla, because you guys have traditionally not specialized in coasters. That one of your coasters is at a tremendous premier park in the world. So that's really a great accomplishment. The junior coaster, it's the kind of the sort of junior, thematically speaking or name wise, of Formula Rossa, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they called it Formula Rossa Junior. And it was really, they really looked at the park and said, like, we've got a bunch of great thrill coasters, but they really realized that, for parents bringing their kids there wasn't a whole lot for them to do because they had specialized in these, big thrill pieces. So when they came to us, we came up with a totally custom design for them. We had actually 3 of our family rides integrated into the layout. So our coaster wraps around one of our towers and 2 of our other kiddie flat rides. So it's a really nice themed area oriented toward families. And it's been a huge hit for them. But yeah, it was a huge feather in our cap that Ferrari decided to go with us and choose us to be the coaster manufacturer for their, premier family attraction.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's great. I'll definitely, next time I go there, hopefully a couple of years or so, because again, it's a repeat park, and I'll definitely want to wait for the special effects coaster, the Dynamic Attractions new gem, to open whenever it opens. But when I go back, I'll have to check that out. So look some pictures of it though. It looks pretty cool here from La Rosa Junior. Think about mine train coasters. They're, of course, Arrow, that was one of their, premier designs back in the day. They created the mine coaster back in the day. And, it used to be, parks would put mine coasters in. That was the thing back in the 80s and so forth. And then, of course, the industry moves on to other designs and whatnot. You don't really see mine coasters being built anymore for the most part. And I think, reflecting on me here in Orlando, Universal Orlando, with the reception that Hagrid's received, even with all the problems it had, it's an intimate and all that, it had some issues. It is the most technically complex coaster in the world with all the launches and the drop track and all that. But even with all the problems it had, and it's gotten a lot better, it's running a lot better, the reception of Hagrid's is incredible. So I think that, given what I've seen with that, I think you guys will do well with the family, launch-based mine train type coaster. And I think there's a lot of room for that type of kind of middle level thrill ride, I guess you could say, in a park. And I love that, I remember seeing this at IAAPA, you talking about it at IAAPA and presenting it and talking about it here again today, the backwards launch, the forwards launch, the different types of vehicles, the flexibility that you can offer your customers. I think you guys will do well with that. I'm excited to see that come into parks for sure.
Yeah, we are too. I mean, and certainly, obviously, being a sales guy, I'm happy to sell anything we have. But, when we look at the marketplace, I am just particularly excited about this one because when I look around, I see a ton of, from us and other people, some really good, family attractions coaster wise. There are obviously a lot of great thrill coasters, but when I visit parks, I definitely see a hole in the marketplace because you kind of have a ton of these 36-inch coasters, a ton of the 48-inch or taller thrill coasters, but not a whole lot at 42 on the coaster side. And that was really pronounced when my youngest, Kira, who I refer to as stubbornly short, she barely cracked 42 inches last year. When we visit parks together, there's not a whole lot she can ride. And some of that's because there aren't a whole lot of options in the space. Some of that's because it's standards change. The coasters that you used to be able to ride at like 42 inches have now been bumped up to 44, 48. There just aren't as many as you can experience because like even, you mentioned Big Bad Wolf earlier, like that was a 42-inch ride. Right. And I think if that opened today, it'd be 48 inches. So we really want to have something that those kids who are taking that big step up and kind of quote unquote riding a real coaster, not a kiddie coaster anymore. when they're riding that first big coaster, on the one hand, we want it to be geared toward them and a lot of fun. But on the other hand, it has to have enough oomph to it that it's going to, thrill teens, tweens, and young adults too. So kind of walking that line is hard. But I think with this design, we've really hit upon something that's going to speak to a lot of riders.
So the other one that you mentioned that I wanted to touch upon, the double heart design. And as you alluded to, all of us that saw it there at IAAPA, and everyone that's seen it since, I'm sure they will look at it and say, okay, that looks, of course, a lot like a Skyrocket 2 Premier ride. And I've been on many of those, not to say what you guys are doing. You guys are offering different options, but those are sort of, cookie cutter. They're always the same, I think 150 feet tall and same layout, sometimes 2 cars, sometimes 3, very, very slight differences. And I enjoy them a lot. So your double heart, you mentioned the lap bar, comfortable lap bar, which sounds great. So a couple of questions for you. You guys are there's nothing going to be over the shoulders or around the neck, right? What's the train capacity on that ride?
So we're offering actually a couple options. We're offering one 12-seater, so one 12-seat train. That's about 500 people per hour. One 16-seat train, which is about 660 people per hour. Or we can do 2 12 or 16-seat trains. So if you have 2 16-seaters, you're going to get up towards 1,000. And those numbers aren't like, hey, here are theoreticals and the actual capacity is going to be about half that. We're trying to really work with real load unload times that parks can do. And so we're giving out real capacities. So we're trying to offer a lot of different options to really meet people's budget requirements and capacity requirements and give a lot of options in that space. So, and on the 2 train versions, we actually have a turntable that allows us to load and unload one while the other is out on the active track.
Perfect. Yeah, that's the challenge for those shuttle coasters is the capacity issues with not being able to have more than one train. So it's great to see with some of these newer designs, a turntable or a linear transfer or track or whatever it may be to help be able to add that second train, to be able to load one while the other is going through its course. So that's fantastic. The other thing that I have had a real problem with on those rides, and again, I love them. I'll ride them every time I go to the parks that they're at. I think they're a great design. Is there's very little room for your legs to even get into the car and get out of the car. They're very narrow cars. So are your trains going to be a little more spacious?
Yeah, ours is going to ride much more like Mako seats, a B&M Hypercoaster. That's the scale and proportions that we're working with, because we did a lot of research when we designed this Lightning train, really looking at, different size around the world and like how large people are at different ages, and really trying to take that into consideration and building rides that A, because it's more comfortable for the guests, but B, because that really has a huge effect on capacity. And so when we're thinking about these numbers, and that's why I said we're not just kind of throwing numbers up on our website and hoping people can make them. We did a lot of research and said, okay, we need to have this space because we need our guests in and out. You want those people moving through. If they're taking 30 or 45 seconds just to pull themselves out of the seat, your capacity, no matter who makes the ride, is just not going to do well. Right. And that's why we paid a lot of attention to our seat spacing, row to row, and how much room they had to get out between the restraint and themselves, and make sure that product was something that where we could really turn people around quickly. So we think we can realistically do like 45 second load unload where we're getting people in and out. Intamin's done a great job with it on the Terran trains. And I think ours is going to be similar where, once you get your crew up and moving for the day, you're going to hit that interval every time and be able to do really good capacity because there's plenty of room for guests to get in and out quickly.
Absolutely. And certainly, like you said, Intamin, like Velocicoaster or Terran, some of these, or I've been on Soaring with Dragon, some of these newer style Intamin trains with a lap bar only, I think they're a win-win. One, they're more comfortable for the riders. They're more exciting for the riders because you have more freedom, and that sense of freedom also means you feel like you're not as secured in as you would be otherwise. With sort of exciting, when you're going through inversions and and high thrill elements. I love that. But also the capacity, like with the capacity I see in Velocicoaster, for example, is absolutely insane. How they can work people through. So if you guys are kind of learning from those lessons and studying the industry, and with your coaster offerings to make it lap bar only, make the trains comfortable, the seats comfortable, and have room for people to get in and out, because between the comfort collars and the kind of narrowness of those premier Skyrocket 2 trains, they're just such a hassle. So I'm glad to see you guys can improve upon that. So the 70 meter is the taller one. What's the top speed going to be of that one?
I think we're about 75 miles per hour, give or take, on that guy.
Yeah, I mean, the fastest triple launch coaster in the world is Soaring with Dragon at 77 miles an hour. No, it's not Pantheon, despite what might say. It's not. It's 77. And so you guys are right there with triple launch. That's going to be a thrilling coaster. I'm excited to, several of these models I'm really looking forward to, but I think the double heart I'm really excited about, because I really would love to see how you guys can really, I don't want to say iterate on that kind of existing design, but really perhaps perfect it or really improve upon it. Have you guys sold any of those yet? Or, can we, what are we looking forward to seeing them? Or
we've had a lot of interest since we debuted the concept, but at IAAPA, we had people coming over to our booth to specifically talk about the double heart. And the combination of A, we came up with a great design, and B, people have started to, in the last year, sort of understand the changes we've made. And so certainly, I don't think if we were to come out with that design 10 years ago, people would have come to Zamperla at IAAPA. But here we had a lot of major players come to us and saying, hey, tell me about the Lightning train that has reduced maintenance costs because of the chassis, and tell me about the double heart. So we're having those conversations that make us very happy about how the perception changed about our capabilities in the market.
That's awesome. That's very exciting. I look forward to seeing, when these new Zamperla coasters pop up, and, hopefully get to some parks that have them eventually. That's really exciting. So obviously there's a lot of technology that, that you guys are working with that you haven't worked with before, like LSM launching, and I think you guys are coming out with drop tracks and some of your models and things like that. So have you guys added a lot of engineering staff?
Definitely. So what we did is, when I mentioned that we kind of created this 5 to 10 year plan of improvement, that was one of the first things we did. So we've actually got, I want to say 25 or 27 engineers on staff dedicated only to coasters. So that is what they do. And that gives us the ability to turn around, conceptual designs really quickly, much faster than we used to. And we also do it totally in-house. So while other people use kind of third parties for engineering, we do all that in-house now, which also, I think, allows us to be more competitive cost-wise and allows us to turn around our engineering packages faster than we used to.
Nice. And everything is manufactured in Italy, or is there manufacturing in the US as well?
Yeah, so we have, a few things here and there that are manufactured other places, but I'd say about 7% of the coaster product is made in Italy.
Got it. So we touched upon this earlier, but Coney Island, of course, is one of the most historic kind of theme park or amusement park related places in the world. I mean, the Cyclone is one of the oldest standing coasters that is still operating out there, and there's so much history. I mean, like I said earlier, I grew up in New Jersey. I am too young to have ridden this ride, but it's a historic landmark, the parachute jump. My mother would talk to me about having ridden that as a kid because she grew up in Brooklyn, which is right there. Coney Island's basically almost part of Brooklyn. So, and there's so much history there. And, it's always so sad when you see history, theme park and coasters and amusement park wise, get erased. Like what just happened with Blue Streak is awful. And so, it's always great to see stories in the reverse sense than what happened with Blue Streak. And for example, Zamperla, a little more than 10 years ago now in 2010, you guys opened Luna Park at the same site where the old Astroland Park was that had fallen into disrepair and, gone into business and whatnot. So talk to me about what Luna Park does for Zamperla in developing new ride concepts and trying out new theming and things like that. What do you guys do there and how does that work for you?
Honestly, for us, it's a great place to learn more about our rides. And what I mean by that is historically, not just us, I'm just talking about my time in the industry. What I've seen is often there's this huge disconnect between the people that engineer and conceptualize the rides and the guys who actually work on them. And then the engineers actually only go out and maybe see a ride in person or ride it sometimes if there's a problem. And that really created, and this is an industry-wide thing, it's just something where I don't think sometimes we were as responsive as we could be as an industry to our clients because we didn't have a lot of practical experience working on the attractions. And really what Luna has given us is we have this operations and maintenance team who are really great people, and they can communicate problems directly with Zamperla. So we'll put our, unit one, like we did the air race, like we did Nebulas and other attractions. So we can run it there for a season, find out, okay, what's working well, what's not working well from a component perspective. Oh, this works well, but to repair this, to like seat restraint monitoring, I have to take this whole component apart. It takes 2 hours. Why don't you build a door here? And so what I think it really gives us is a much better end product for our buyer. They're getting, kind of unit 2, 3, 4, 5, and they've already hopefully had a lot of improvements made upon them just because I don't care who you are. There are a lot of rides out there that, you put them together and until they get runtime on, whether it's a big problem or a small problem, you just aren't able to really understand where the issues are because they haven't seen a lot of runtime. And Luna gives us the ability to just say, oh, that's a great ride, but we need to change that because that's really inconvenient. Or like on even small things, like on the Nebulas, we changed kind of bolt locations and padding locations just because we found we had one area where we needed more padding because of wear. And we had just some bolts that were hidden and you had to cut the foam away. It's like, let's just leave those exposed so you're not cutting the foam off when you need to do a restraint replacement, things like that. So I think it's made us a much better company. Not only we have a great park there that we can take clients to, that's obviously huge for us as salespeople, but also the fact that we're making better rides because we're getting our own internal feedback, making improvements, and then really starting to sell the product out to clients.
Fantastic. See a lot of synergy there. That makes a lot of sense. And think about, where you as a salesperson. So I'm assuming, well, of course, you joined in the pandemic, so perhaps it's a little different, but I'm guessing they put it this way, that you're looking forward to as the hope the pandemic, gets under control and things get back to, I guess, what they call the new normal, that you'll be able to meet potential clients at Luna Park, or fly up there or drive up there and kind of show them around and have them try out the rides, right?
Yeah, no, and actually last summer, kind of when things were, better and the vaccines ramped up, we even had clients who were coming out last summer to check out attractions. So I got to go up last summer. So and then with the junior coaster and super flume opening next year, we already have clients asking to come visit or come look at construction this winter and spring. So it's been a really nice place for us. And I think it's been very busy with people checking out what we're doing there.
That's awesome. That's really great. I love it. So I'm a huge podcast fan in general and started listening to podcasts about 4 years ago. And one of the first ones I started listening to is Coaster Radio. Mike and EB, the hosts, and they've talked about periodically about on their show about involvement, I guess, in some theming. I think it's at Luna Park. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know all the details. They did some stuff, and then I think they were involved in some of the theming on the big waves, Neptune theming that we ended up not installing it because of COVID. So the Neptune themed big waves that you see on our social media was supposed to open at Coney in 2020. But because all the construction got stopped in, the entire city, we decided to send it back to Italy, and we've been running it testing. But I believe those guys might have been involved with some of the theming conceptualization for that Neptune kind of overlay on that Big Waves product.
Got it. And what kind of ride is Big Waves again?
So big waves is kind of a combination jumping star and tidal wave. So it's basically you get on, you go up, and then we do kind of a fake drop and take you up again, and then drop you in the water. And a lot of people have joked that it looks like a big guillotine because we have this kind of these big metal pieces that come to a point because it penetrates the water, and we have this huge wave that comes up. But it's a lot of fun, and I actually got to ride it on one of my factory visits this year. So it's really cool because if you're on board, you definitely get wet, but the visual of this huge wall of water that's like 30 feet tall coming 4 feet or 3 feet in front of you is awesome to watch. But then if you're not riding, you just same thing, you see that but from off board. So you just see the ride drop and this huge wall of water comes at everybody, and it's really, really cool.
That's great. And there's some coaster enthusiasts out there. They're strictly coasters. They go to parks, they only go on coasters. That's all they do. That's all they care about. For me, I'm a whatever name you want to use for it, equal opportunity or whatnot. I love everything about parks. Everything from the immersion, the theming, the coasters, the flat rides, the dark rides, the food, everything. But one of them is I love water rides. And it's funny because I see a lot of my coaster enthusiast friends, and even the hot weather, and my friends say, oh, I don't want to get my shoes wet and all this. I wear sandals to parks. It's part of why I do. I love water rides. And I remember, you were just kind of talking through the nebulas there. Mike and DB, they were talking about what the ride does. I think this was a year or two ago. I just didn't remember. Thanks for refreshing my memory. And I remember that when they were talking about it, just like how you were, it's like, I just thought, I want to get on this ride. This sounds awesome. So that is not at Luna Park. It was, but now that you guys shifted back to the factory, is it going to wind up at Luna Park, you think, eventually? Or
probably not. I honestly don't know because I don't run the operations side, but my guess is I think we're probably going to try and find another home for that particular unit and maybe bring it back in the future. But just with us having the junior coaster and Flume opening next year, it's a pretty big investment for 22 already, with having a really big junior coaster as well as the Super Flume.
Got it. And what is the Super Flume, by the way?
So the Super Flume is, kind of like I talked about us looking around the coaster space and saying, where do we find opportunities? Super Flume was a similar place where we have a lot of these parks retiring their kind of old aero flumes because they're getting just too expensive to take care of. Hopkins really isn't in the marketplace anymore. You have Whitewater purchase them. So you have, like Whitewater, Intamin, Mock, they make really good water rides, but they're all definitely not cheap water rides,
Right.
And so we said, how can we make something that is a little more price conscious for buyers, but has that same level of thrill and uniqueness? So the Super Flume, we created this whole water system where the wave is much more like a tidal wave when it comes down. So you get that nice off-ride visual. But we also created this flume ride that this is kind of one of our standard layouts. So we have that with the junior coaster intertwined. So it's kind of an updated flume concept. But the other big thing is that one of the reasons a lot of parks took out the flumes is because the boats just get really difficult to maintain after a certain point. The fiberglass gets holes in it, you have to repair it. And we actually, our engineering team came up with this whole idea where instead of having to rework the boats every off season, refiberglass them or gel coat them, you can actually just take the bottom of the boat, it rips off, it becomes a wearable part. You put a new one on with construction adhesive, and that's good for the season. So we're really hoping to, again, lower your cost of ownership, take away all those maintenance time and costs, and just make something that you replace that in one day instead of you replacing all your boat holes over an off season. So we really think that in addition to being a fun ride, we're really kind of changing the ownership metrics on what it costs to maintain that vlog flume every year, and hopefully make it something that's much more affordable than the older style flumes were.
That's great. I love it because I love log flume rides. And other than the major parks like Disney or Universal Studios Adventure, you don't still see log flumes taken out by your regional parks, your Six Flags, Cedar Fairs, etc. And some of those regional parks log flume rides back in the day were great rides. And they fell into disrepair. And of course, they're being arrows. They can't get parts for them. And like I said, the maintenance, they're expensive. So I'm excited to see that you guys are sort of trying to help bring back the log flume or, help it kind of stay alive. So that's great. I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think our portfolio right now is a really nice balance of, it's mostly new concepts, but we're also, looking in the past and saying, that was a great ride. Why are people taking it out? How can we make it better so that a new generation of, riders can enjoy it? Because still, at most parks, the log flume is the most popular attraction. And there's a reason for that. So we said, okay, what are the problems? Instead of just saying, we're not going to make one, how do we make one that the market wants? And that's really been the focus.
Right. Makes sense. That's awesome. So keeping in mind, we talked a little bit about this earlier, the mission of Coaster Challenge is to really push forward theme park therapy and help people face their fears and, face anxiety, depression, and just live better lives through theme parks. Do you have any advice that you'd like to give our audience?
I would say for me, it's just really two things. One is, this hobby is, I think, sort of this unique combination of fear and fun, and to definitely sort of make it your own. Because one thing I love about our industry is that if you're interested in so many things, whether it's art or if it's, 400-foot drop towers that just scare you, or it's coaster technology, I like it because there's so many places to be interested in it, but also we're always looking for good people. So if you have a passion for some segment, if you love amusement parks, but you're an artist, there's a place for you in this industry. Flip side, if you like rides, but you really like working with your hands, and Lord knows we need more people who are great mechanics right now. That's something we're really, as a country, we're struggling to find. That's one thing I think being on this side I've seen that I really enjoy is, yes, there are a lot of cool things to do as a guest, but there are also a lot of great jobs that, you've probably never thought of that exist in this industry. So, no, I cannot guarantee that everyone's going to be, Alan Schilke and be able to design a roller coaster. I can't make that promise, but I can promise that there are a lot of opportunities that, because people only think, oh, I want to design coasters and that's it. And honestly, that was me too as a kid. Like I would have loved to design coasters, but I also realized in high school that I was good at math and science, but I wasn't great. And so if there are less people designing roller coasters than, the space shuttle, that kind of told me that was maybe not my calling, but I was able to find my way into it in a different way. So I would certainly say that if you have a passion for the industry and want to try to get into it, definitely see where your skill set can kind of mesh up with the industry, because there are a lot of opportunities right now.
Yeah, that's really good. I like the things you said. That's awesome. There's so many things that you can do in the industry. If I had one wish for all of our younger listeners that they want to work in the industry, I wish that they could all go to IAAPA once, because all they have to do is walk around IAAPA, and what IAAPA will tell them, amongst other things, is how many companies, how many different products are involved in the theme park industry. And it could give them so many ideas of, oh, I actually love doing that. I didn't realize that was part of theme parks. Yeah, I'm an expert in that. I'm really good at that. I should apply to those companies, and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that's not how IAAPA works. But if anything, again, like you did there, give some advice, kind of feeding off of you, Adam, to our listeners, is maybe you can't go to IAAPA, but what you can do? Every IAAPA, as you get close to the IAAPA show of that year, the big trade show of the year in November in Orlando, go onto IAAPA's website and look at the exhibitor list. That's free to do. You don't have to travel. Take a few hours. Just look at all the exhibitors that are there, and that'll give you an idea of the kinds of companies you can look at potentially working at, the kinds of jobs. So also
with that, obviously not everyone has the, whether it's money or it's time, the ability to do this, but IAAPA does have their ambassador program too. And so if you are, I think they take college age students and they're people who kind of do everything at IAAPA. So it's people who, guide groups around the floor, and people who really kind of the behind the scenes kids, if you will, that are kind of in college, that just, it's a volunteer position, I believe. If you just Google like IAAPA ambassador program, it really gives you this access to the industry. You're working while you're down there, but you get to go on the show floor. You get to see a lot of behind the scenes things. You get to attend stuff like the social. So that's a nice way for people who are sort of looking for that foot in the door, because it is obviously, it's intimidating and also not necessarily practical just to jump down to the show floor and try and find a job. But this is a great way just to meet people. And I've met some really great ambassadors over the years, some really young kids that were just, again, passionate about the industry, wanted to get in it, weren't sure how to get in it. And this was just kind of their first step at meeting connections, meeting people, and meeting, which I think is also important, meeting other kids their age who also had a passion for the industry in real life instead of online. So just all those things just work together really well. So if you are looking for that, just Google, I believe it's just Google IAAPA ambassador program, and you'll find more information about that and see if it might be a fit for you.
That's fantastic. I love it. I just love how this advice is comes naturally through conversation like this. That's great. And I'm sure some listeners that are listening to this interview will appreciate that. Thank you, Adam.
Sure.
So the last thing to ask, like we always do, is normally we do have a lot of enthusiasts on the show, and they talk about their YouTube channels and social media. But obviously, you work for Zamperla, you're working in the industry. But anything you'd like to plug, just anything you want to kind of direct people towards.
Yeah. So website zamperla.com. We are ZAMPERLA, just so you get the spelling right. So yeah, check that out. On the coaster side, we actually have a separate account for our coasters. It's much newer. I help run that. So if you Google Zamperla Coasters on Facebook or on Instagram, we're there. Also, look up Zamperla Rides on YouTube. We kind of have the whole portfolio for the company there. And then also, if you like kind of just nerdy roller coaster history stuff, you can look for me, Roller Coaster Sales Guy, on Instagram. I just have this sort of hodgepodge of my travels and food and family and roller coaster history on there. So whatever sounds good to you, hit one of them up. But we try and put a lot of new stuff and new content up on our Instagram page specifically for Zamperla Coasters. So check that out if you love coasters.
That's awesome. Thank you, Adam. And actually, I'm going to follow a couple of those that you mentioned after I'm done with the interview here. So appreciate that. Well, thank you again for your time. Obviously, you being the coaster guy at Zamperla, all these new exciting coaster models. You're busy, you're moving. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and tell our audience more about you and what you guys are doing at Zamperla. So thank you again.
Happy to. Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.